you very much for turning out today for a long-standing tradition of our department and of the Center for the Study of War and Society, the Edgar and Jerry Wilson Lecture. My name is Dr. Levicius from the History Department. I direct the center, and those of you who are not familiar with the Center for the Study of War and Society, especially if you're a graduate student, I urge you to get to know us, because we're really proud of the role that we've had in enriching graduate student education in our department. The center is part of the history department. And the track record that we've had is one that we're very proud of. There's already 8 students who have received major national or international fellowships for their research. And we also support graduate education through the award of fellowships to students like the Jerry Wilson Fellowship. Let me say a word or two about the person who endowed this lecture and the fellowship that's awarded previous. That was a dear friend of the center who's no longer with us and who's very missed, Mr. Edgar Wilson. The endowment was established in his name, Edgar and Beatrice Jerry Wilson, his wife. The late Edgar C. Wilson was UT class of 1940. His wife, Jerry Wilson, was a graduate of Millikan College and a registered nurse. Mr. Wilson was a Silver Star recipient during World War II, had served as a field artillery forward observer and artillery liaison officer with the 80th Infantry Division, 3rd U.S. Army in Europe. And I should add that even more than all these other things, he was the soul of generosity and a dear friend, a real gentleman through and through that we're privileged to have known over many years. The fellowship in their name is given annually to a graduate student at the history department who has completed all PhD requirements except for the dissertation, with a focus on American military history, and preference is usually, but not always, given to applicants whose work examines World War II. So this will be the exception that proves the rule. And we're so proud of our exception. Our speaker today, Dr. Vicki Rozema, who, as you can read in the pamphlet that was distributed, is already a published author of 3 books of history and numerous articles. In addition to being the recipient of the Wilson Fellowship, Dr. Rozema is the winner of the William B. Anderson Fellowship for Military History, also administered by the Center through the History Department, and the Bruce Wheeler Graduate Research Award in American History. The most important thing I can probably say about her at this point is that she quite recently completed, under the direction of Dr. Dan Feller, her dissertation entitled Coveted Lands, Transportation, Agriculture, Timber, and Mining in Cherokee Country Before and After Removal. And she's currently a lecturer in American and World History here at the University of Tennessee. Her lecture today is entitled Science and Technology Awakened, Exploiting Resources in the Cherokee Nation. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Rozema.
Let me start with an apology. When I woke up this morning, I had absolutely no voice. I had the worst case laryngitis. I don't know if it's because of my allergies or because I went to see Capitol Steps last night and laughed my head off. I haven't laughed so loud in ages. But fortunately, my voice has improved all day. I want to share with you what was going on in the early Republic, particularly in the South, from about 1800 to the Cherokee removal of 1838. And we'll also talk just a little bit about what happened with some of the plans that these white Southern leaders were developing for the South in the way of canals and railroads. We're going to start with 1832, when Tennessee Supreme Court Judge and amateur geologist Jacob Peck conducted a geological survey of the Gold region of southeast Tennessee, North Georgia, and western North Carolina. Most of these gold fields lay inside the boundaries of the Cherokee Nation. In addition to mapping gold reserves, Peck's survey reported copper, iron, garnets, zircon, and silver in the Cherokee Nation. The results of Peck's study appeared in an 1833 issue of the American Journal of Science and Arts, the nation's leading scientific journal. Peck's description of the gold mine area in the Cherokee Nation, East Tennessee, North Carolina, was the first to be published. The gold mines in Cherokee, North Georgia, were well known by this time, but the gold mines in North Carolina and Tennessee were not. To the rest of the nation, it now appeared that the gold deposits within the Cherokee Nation must be limitless. Peck's interests in the Cherokee Nation, like those of many other prominent white Southerners, extended beyond just the gold and other mineral resources that could be found in the nation. Peck, like many educated white Southerners, saw how recent advances in science and technology, including the industries of mining and transportation, opened up new opportunities to tap the resources of the whole South. As he explained in his essay on the mineral riches of the Cherokee Nation, quote, "Science and enterprise had just been awakened to explore this whole region," end quote. And Peck and his fellow Southerners were anxious to use new advances in science to do so. This was an era when Southern leaders believed that newly discovered advances in technology must be used to exploit all the natural resources of the fledgling republic so that problems in Western expansion, defense, and commerce could be overcome. It was within this environment of burgeoning interest in science and technology that the Cherokee removal of 1838 took place. Americans became increasingly interested in the study of science after the War of 1812. The study of the natural history of the interior of the United States had actually begun in earnest a decade earlier, when the Lewis and Clark and Zebulon Pike expeditions caught the imagination of many Americans. Discoveries made on the expeditions overturned many scientific theories formulated in Europe and demonstrated a need to develop new classification systems for recently identified North American species. It was not until about 1815, though, when a younger generation of American leaders, imbued with a new sense of national pride, began to actively resent scientific advances made in Europe, that a significant movement to apply science and engineering to solve national and regional problems began. The War of 1812 contributed to this movement by exposing weaknesses in financial, transportation, and defense systems of the young republic. For example, the war reinforced the importance of developing critical domestic industries, such as gunpowder and weapons productions, so that the United States would not be dependent on European powers. The new generation of American leaders also began to look towards science and new technologies like canals, railroads, and steamboats to solve problems inherent in Western expansion. At the beginning of the 19th century, the science of geology was in its infancy, and engineering had not yet developed into a profession in America. Colleges in the U.S. slowly began to add to their science programs by recruiting scholars trained in Europe or Americans who were self-taught in the sciences. Two schools that led in the production of scientists were Yale, where Benjamin Silliman, a chemist and the editor of the American Journal of Science and Arts, taught many promising students, and West Point, which became a leader in training engineers and topographers for the military. Because American universities lagged behind their European counterparts in establishing schools for science and engineering, scientific inquiry into geology, agriculture, linguistics, and other disciplines was led primarily by laymen with little or no formal education in the fields that they were investigating and who earned their livelihood in other professions. Many of these early leaders in scientific investigation became interested in multiple areas of study and did not limit their research to a single field. For example, George W. Fanshawe, an English farmer living in New York, investigated linguistics, agriculture, and geology, while Jacob Peck, our Tennessee Supreme Court judge, was interested in geology, mathematics, topography, and railroad engineering. Many of America's leaders were also involved in agricultural research and publications of their research, like Governor George Gilmer of Georgia, who served as president of the Agricultural Association of the slaveholding states. Advances in agriculture, mining, road, canal, and railroad construction all took hold first in the North, then spread to the South, where leaders like Vice President and Senator John C. Calhoun of South Carolina and Georgia Governor George Troup sought ways to use science and technology to solve transportation and mining problems. Because of a shortage of American scientists, they looked to engineers and scientists who were either born or educated in Europe for the expertise to solve their commercial problems. Southern leaders like Andrew Jackson and Edmund Pendleton Gaines, who had direct connections to the Department of War, also looked toward the Army Corps of Engineers for the necessary expertise to resolve engineering problems. These problems included internal improvements and gold mining projects in the Cherokee country. The fact that the Cherokees still occupied the lands the Southerners wanted to have surveyed for transportation routes or mining opportunities did not deter them or the engineers they recruited. Although the South trailed the North in scientific education and application of technology, it did lead the nation in state-funded mineralogical surveys. These were prompted partly because of the deposits of gold, but also due to problems of soil exhaustion in the South. North Carolina, where gold was first discovered in 1799, was the first state to order a geological survey. It began in 1821 and was led by Denison Olmsted, the first professor of chemistry, geology, and mineralogy at the University of North Carolina, and a former student of Silliman at Yale. Denison's survey focused on North Carolina's gold region. Other states soon undertook their own surveys, including South Carolina in 1824, Massachusetts in 1830, Tennessee in 1831, and Georgia and New York in 1836. The first federal survey, authorized by the Topographical Bureau of the Corps of Engineers, took place in 1834, and it was led by newly appointed U.S. geologist George W. Fanshawe, the amateur British agricultural and geology student. And it covered several southern states and Indian territories. In 1831, the Tennessee legislature authorized the appointment of Gerard Troost as the state's first official geologist and mineralogist. Troost was a Dutch physician, pharmacist, and geologist who had moved to Nashville from New Harmony, Indiana in the late 1820s. He opened a natural history museum in Nashville before joining the faculty of the University of Nashville, where he was a professor of mineralogy, geology, and chemistry, and where he taught the state's first geology course. The legislature ordered its new geologist to make a geological survey of the state with a view to develop its mineral resources. By 1836, Troost had conducted 3 surveys mapping resources in Tennessee, including the coal region, which ran from Cumberland Mountain in Kentucky to Monte Sano in Huntsville, Alabama. In October of 1836, the state asked Troost to travel to the Ocoee district to survey the lands which had recently been illegally ceded by a small group of Cherokees in the Treaty of New Echota